Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare recesses of the committee at any time. We welcome everyone to today's hearing on oversight of the U.S. Department of Justice, report by Special Counsel Robert Mueller III on the investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election and related matters. I will now recognize myself for an opening statement. Attorney General Barr has informed us that he will not appear today. Although we worked to accommodate his concerns, he objects to the prospect of answering questions by staff counsel and to the possibility that we may go into executive session to discuss certain sensitive topics. Given the Attorney General's lack of candor before other congressional committees, I believe my colleagues and I were right to insist on the extended questioning. To my knowledge, not even the ranking member was opposed to the idea of moving into closed session if necessary. But even if Democrats and Republicans disagree on the format of this hearing, we must come together to protect the integrity of this chamber. The administration may not dictate the terms of a hearing in this hearing room. The challenge we face is bigger than a single witness. Late last night, the Department of Justice wrote to inform us that they will ignore our subpoena for the unredacted Mueller report and the underlying evidence. They have made no meaningful attempt at accommodating that subpoena, which was due yesterday. The letter references the Attorney General's offer to 12 members of Congress, 12 out of 435, to look behind some, but not all, of the redactions, provided that we agree not to discuss what we see with our colleagues and that we leave our notes behind at the Department of Justice. It is urgent that we see the documents we have subpoenaed, but I cannot agree to conditions that prevent me from discussing the full report with my colleagues and that prevent the House from acting on the full report in any meaningful way. An accommodation designed to prevent us from taking official action is no accommodation at all. Every member of this committee, Democrat and Republican alike, should understand the consequences when the executive branch tells us that they will simply ignore a lawful subpoena from Congress. If left unchecked, this act of obstruction will make it that much harder for us to hold the executive branch accountable for waste, fraud, and abuse, or to enact legislation to curb that kind of misconduct, or any kind of misconduct, no matter which party holds this chamber or the White House at a given moment. The challenge we face is also bigger than the Mueller report. If all we knew about President Trump were contained in the four corners of that report, there would be good reason to question his fitness for office. But the report is not where the story ends. In the days since the Department of Justice released the redacted version of the report, President Trump has told Congress that he plans to fight all of our subpoenas. The average person is not free to ignore a congressional subpoena, nor is the president. His promise to obstruct our work extends far beyond his contacts with the Russian government and allegations of obstruction of justice. The president has also prevented us from obtaining information about voting rights, ACA litigation, and his cruel family separation policy, among other matters. The challenge we face is also not limited to this committee. In recent weeks, administration witnesses have simply failed to show for properly noticed depositions. The Secretary of the Treasury continues to ignore his clear statutory obligation to produce the president's tax returns. The president's private attorneys sued Chairman Cummings in his personal capacity in an attempt to block the release of certain financial documents. Ladies and gentlemen, the challenge we face is that the President of the United States wants desperately to prevent Congress, a co-equal branch of government, from providing any check whatsoever to even his most reckless decisions. He is trying to render Congress inert as a separate and co-equal branch of government. The challenge we face is that if we don't stand up to him together today, we risk forever losing the power to stand up to any president in the future. The very system of government of the United States, the system of limited power, the system of not having a president as a dictator is very much at stake. The Attorney General of the United States is sworn to uphold the Constitution as our nation's chief law enforcement officer. He has an obligation to do everything in his power to warn the President of the damage he risks and the liability he assumes by directly threatening our system of checks and balances and of limited government. Sadly, the Attorney General has failed in that responsibility. He has failed to check the President's worst instincts. He has not only misrepresented the findings of the Special Counsel, he has failed to protect the Special Counsel's investigation from unfair political attacks. He has himself unfairly attacked the Special Counsel's investigation. He has failed the men and women of the Department of Justice by placing the needs of the President over the fair administration of justice. He has even failed to show up today. Yes, we will continue to negotiate for access to the full report for another couple of days. And yes, we will have no choice but to move quickly to hold the Attorney General in contempt if he stalls or fails to negotiate in good faith. But the Attorney General must make a choice. Every one of us must make the same choice. That choice is now an obligation of our office. The choice is simple. We can stand up to this President in defense of the country and the Constitution and the liberty we love, or we can let the moment pass us by. I do not, and we have seen in other countries what happens when you allow such moments to pass by. I do not know what Attorney General Barr will choose. I do not know what my Republican colleagues will choose. But I am certain that there is no way forward for this country that does not include a reckoning with this clear and present danger to our constitutional order. History will judge us for how we face this challenge. We will all be held accountable in one way or the other. And if he does not provide this committee with the information it demands and the respect it deserves, Mr. Barr's moment of accountability will come soon enough. I now recognize the ranking member of the Judiciary Committee for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's be very clear. There is only one reason, and one reason only, at this point, we are not being able to fulfill our constitutional role of oversight, and that is the chairman's demands that were played out yesterday. We could have had a hearing today. What bothers me the most about this is not only did, in standing for the questions that were discussed and the issues that have been discussed between me and the chairman, not only did he take the ability for the American people to hear again from Bill Barr, he took our ability to hear from Bill Barr today. To protect, maybe, because some didn't feel like they could ask proper questions. Maybe they wanted more staff questions. Who knows? But yesterday we found this, that he claims that he wants staff to question the Attorney General because the 5 minute per member is not enough. But yet we spent and approved a motion yesterday that said we could do a whole hour, an extra hour, between the chairman and myself. He could have took one of these fabulous members that he has, and he has some excellent attorneys on his side, some of the best. He could have given them all 30 minutes, and they could have questioned the Attorney General any way they wanted to. Instead, we go back to a circus political stunt to say we want it to look like an impeachment hearing because they won't bring impeachment proceedings. That's the reason. Take whatever you want to take. You can go out and have press conferences. You can state it from this dais. You can say whatever you want to have. But the reason Bill Barr is not here today is because the Democrats decided they didn't want him here today. That's the reason he's not here. You could have done anything else you wanted. And what is amazing to me is to say that he is scared of answering questions, to scared that he's not. And you can disagree with the Attorney General all you want, but for yesterday, he sat for over almost 6 hours in the Senate voluntarily asking questions, even on a second round that was taken up by Democrats who wanted to ask more questions. And you can agree, did he do good, did he do bad? It doesn't matter, but we're not getting that opportunity today because the stunt and the circus continues over here. All we had to do, we agreed to more time. We could talk about executive session, but no. For some reason, for some purpose, except the optics of something they can't do or don't want to do right now, they wanted to have a staff member ask questions. I said before, if that staff member wants to ask questions so desperately, run for Congress. Put a pin on, find a committee. But you know, I can continue on and on and on about the issues that we have here and the impeachment agenda and whatever you want to have, and saying that he's blackmailing this committee, he's terrified to come before this committee. I think yesterday he proved he's not terrified to sit before anybody, especially the Senate, which they actually extended the question time on. He answered the question, whether you like the question or not. As my chairman told me yesterday, it's not a matter of where we agree or disagree on this. We have the motions, we move the motion, we do the motion. You can agree with the Attorney General or disagree with the Attorney General, but not hearing from them is a travesty for this committee today. But I would be remiss if I also did not mention the largest tragedy of this day. That actually was from yesterday. The chairman just stated a few moments ago that we can't let moments pass, and I agree completely. Because what happened yesterday on this dais was a travesty. When you do not recognize members for valid motions, when you call things dilatory, questioning the motives of what members are doing it for. I have sat on this committee for 6 years, and I have sat through hours of motions to strike the last word, of giving other members on the minority side more time, more time. One of my biggest concerns I ever had with Chairman Goodlatte is, why do you let it continue? Just call the previous question. And on two occasions last Congress, he did. On our resolutions of inquiry, after almost 6 to 7 hours of debate. The question I have here is not what Bill Barr is scared of. My question is, what are the Democrats scared of? They don't want Bill Barr here today. They've had the report, they've read it, they don't like what's in it. The chairman won't even go look at what the Attorney General offered him. It's pretty amazing to me. He wants to go in executive session and ask questions about it, but he won't go read it. Now, you can go read it and ask for more. But here's the problem today, and this problem from yesterday is not over. If the majority wants to run a committee in which minority rights do not matter, parliamentary procedure does not matter. We saw it on full display yesterday. It will not continue. We will continue this exercise, and we will exercise what we have as minority, which is the minority rights to ask questions, to make motions. Because at the end of the day, unless we've forgotten, Mr. Chairman, you've got more votes than we do. You will get what you want. But just like we sat on this side and you sat on this side and got to spend hours talking about whatever you wanted to talk about while Chairman Goodlatte sat there and let you do it. And all you wanted to, and the question that bothered me the most yesterday was, we got time, we got to get on to another bill. Timing does not trump minority rights. And there's not a member on this dais that should say it's not. And freshman members or anybody else who's here for the first time, that's not how this committee works. And if you don't believe me, ask Chairman Sensenbrenner. For 3 times was chairman of this committee, and he laid it out clearly yesterday. But when we degrade members of my side, calling Ms. Lesko's amendment ridiculous, calling ours dilatory, that's just wrong and should offend everybody on this dais. Mr. Chairman, this is wrong. The tragedy of today is not that you have an empty chair, not that you have props. You can call the Attorney General whatever you want. You know, I'm reminded of sticks and stones kind of quote. But what really bothers me today is the travesty of what happened in minority rights yesterday. And there's not a member of the Democrats who were on this committee last year that can honestly look me in the face and say, y'all were not treated much better by a chairman who actually followed the rules than we were treated yesterday. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Ordinarily at this point, I would introduce the witness, but instead, we will conclude this proceedings. I just want to say, we didn't choose not to have Mr. Barr come. He chose. We cannot permit him or anybody in the administration to dictate the manner in which we function. This does not include our inquiry into the Attorney General's handling of the Mueller report,
point of parliamentary inquiry,
his conduct before Congress, nor does it conclude our efforts
I seek recognition
to
for a
compel
parliamentary
production
inquiry.
of the entire report and its underlying materials. We will not hear from the Attorney General today, but this committee intends to obtain the information that it needs to conduct its constitutional oversight and legislative responsibilities. We will defend the prerogatives of Congress. We will defend the rights of the American people to know what's going on. We will defend the constitutional scheme of equal and coordinate branches of government. We will make sure that no president becomes a monarch. We need the information without delay. The hearing
Mr.
is
Chairman,
adjourned.
And we'll do so with trampling minority rights.
It's going to be, Mr. Chairman, where there is not going to be a recognition of members who seek legitimate inquiry as to the procedures
that is in the past. But the president is continuing to tweet and say things that imply that if somebody refuses to tell the truth or speaks against him, that there will be consequences to pay. There are numerous things that we have a responsibility and an obligation to investigate and to oversee. And I think we are truly in a new phase of this entire situation that is deeply, deeply destructive to the Constitution and to the foundations of our democracy.
I think what the House Judiciary Committee and my colleagues and Chairman Nadler did today was to do something that the American people have not seen. Since the Watergate proceedings of Richard Nixon, they have not seen a president not stand up to the Congress, but stand up to the Constitution in a way that rejects all of its parameters and all of the dignity and the order that we have run this country. The Constitution started out by saying we wanted to form a more perfect union. Today, the Attorney General joined with his supervisor, the President of the United States, decided to show the American people that this is not a democracy, that in fact we do not adhere to the rule of law, and we will continue to be disrespectful to the people's house. I think my line of questioning, as my colleagues have indicated, would be just the truth. As the March 27th Mueller letter stated to the Attorney General that he wanted the documents to be released. They were not released. And so here we stand today with no other option other than to hold the Attorney General in contempt, which we hope that will happen. We have not done that because we wanted to continue negotiations. So I would simply ask the question, is this the way we want to run this nation? Do we want a president that does not welcome the truth and subjecting those who work for him to be tested on the truth? Do we not understand the Constitution and Article 1 and Article 2? This Judiciary Committee will not be targeting anyone. All we'll be doing is doing our job, and that is to have members of the Cabinet of the President of the United States to come before this committee and tell the truth. We will not stop until we get the truth, and until the truth is told to the American people, and the American people will decide as we go forward that the truth has to be acted on. And that's what I think some of our Republican friends are afraid of.
Attorney General Bill Barr is now one of the most dangerous men in Washington, D.C., for three reasons. First, he intentionally mischaracterized the Mueller report. He was then told by Robert Mueller that he mischaracterized the Mueller report, and instead of apologizing, he doubles down and continues to mislead the American people. Second, today he ignored the will of Congress, oversight responsibilities of Congress, and lawfully issued subpoenas. And third, right now he is suing to eliminate your health care coverage. Let's not forget, right now he is suing in court to eliminate pre-existing conditions health care coverage and taking health care coverage away from millions of Americans. We in Congress will rein him in. We will hold him accountable.
As a first-time member of Congress, I can't imagine any place else I would rather be right now. I mean, as a student of American history, as a supporter of our Constitution, this is just such a grave moment, and I hope everyone is understanding how grave it is, particularly those at the White House. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. You know, I just have to say, as a former police chief, that it was painful and disgraceful to see the nation's top cop abandon his responsibilities to allow an empty chair to speak for him this morning. However, as a committee member, we were respectful enough to put the Honorable William P. Barr, to put honorable on his name tag, if you will, this morning. However, but if you look at what the Attorney General has done since he has been in office, he certainly worked harder to protect someone who does not deserve to be protected. There's not much that the Attorney General has done as the nation's top cop that we can consider honorable. And so this morning was a dark day, a dark morning for the United States of America and all that the Department of Justice should mean to this nation. So, thank you.
In the 2016 elections, this nation was attacked from outside of its borders by the Russians. As a result of their outside attack, we are now being attacked from the inside by the very Trump administration whom the Russians favored. This is a very dark day and a very dark time for our republic. It is under attack. The worst kind of damage that can be done to America is from its enemies from within. And we have enemies and we have aiders and abettors of those enemies. I'm afraid that we have reached a time when the people of this great nation must stand up and demand that Congress take appropriate action to stop this attack on our republic and save this nation, its democracy, and all of the ideals of liberty, fairness, and justice that we all hold dear. Thank you.
I've been a student of government all my life. I watched the Watergate hearings from the beginning to the end. This smacks so much of Watergate. An Attorney General like John Mitchell, who believes the president is above the law. That is not America. The president is not above the law, and if the president thinks that the special counsel's investigation is a witch hunt, he cannot stop it. But our Attorney General thinks so. Chicken Barr should have shown up today and answered questions. He was afraid of Barry Burke. He was afraid of Norm Eisen. An Attorney General who is picked for his legal acumen and his abilities would not be fearful of any other attorneys questioning him for 30 minutes. This man was picked to be Roy Cohn and to be Donald Trump's fixer. The Black Sox look clean compared to this team. It's a sad day in America.
Good morning. I did not have the privilege of being born into this country. I became an American citizen when I was 20 years old, and I took an oath to protect and defend the Constitution against all foreign and domestic enemies. Attorney General Barr took the same oath, and today he shows that the only oath that he is now following is to protect and defend the president, who right now is threatening the strength of our democracy. Having come from Latin America, I understand very well what it means when a man in power starts circumventing equal branches of government. We must not allow this to happen in the United States of America. Thank you.
Good morning. The Attorney General has a constitutional responsibility to uphold the rule of law. Instead, he's done everything to undermine the rule of law. The so-called Attorney General is abrasive, evasive, and unpersuasive. He is a disgrace to the office that he currently holds. The so-called Attorney General is missing in action, absent without official leave, and has clearly made the decision to serve as the personal fixer for Donald Trump, inconsistent with the oath of office that he has taken. And we as House Democrats recognize that we are a separate and co-equal branch of government. We don't work for Donald Trump. We work for the American people. We have a constitutional responsibility to serve as a check and balance on an out-of-control executive branch. Donald Trump, the so-called Attorney General, and his minions are out of control right now. We won't overreach. We won't over-politicize. We won't over-investigate. But we will do our constitutional oversight responsibility. The so-called Attorney General can run, but he cannot hide.
Today, Attorney General Barr and this administration have done a great disservice to the American people. It's not only about the Mueller report. But this is about protecting the integrity of our national security. This is about protecting the integrity of our elections. This is about protecting the integrity of people in this country being able to have affordable health care. They have done a great disservice to the American people. And we, Congress, have the responsibility as a co-equal branch of government to protect and to serve, and to make sure the American people have the facts and the information that they need to make sure that they know that government is truly working on their behalf. And my colleagues and I will continue to stand, to fight for the truth, continue to stand for what is right, to make sure that democracy works for each and every individual in this country. Today, we will still continue to stand to wait for the truth because you deserve it.
How do you put some teeth behind your enforcement demands, given this unprecedented level of what used to be White House defiance?
Well, I think oh, sure. I mean, I think the members, I think we all believe very strongly that the next step is to begin proceedings to hold the Attorney General in contempt for the failure to comply with the subpoena yesterday. I think we are all pressing our chairman to do that. He's, as he has been, attempting to negotiate in good faith to see if the Attorney General will do it voluntarily. But in the absence of an agreement there, it is our position that the Attorney General is in contempt of Congress, that we have a responsibility to compel his compliance with a lawfully issued subpoena, because, as I said earlier, if the executive branch can willfully violate lawfully issued subpoenas, they will have successfully eliminated congressional oversight. It cannot be up to the executive branch to decide what witnesses and what evidence we will collect in our constitutionally mandated oversight responsibility. So the next step will be an effort to begin proceedings to hold the Attorney General in contempt if, in fact, this negotiation or conversation doesn't result in an agreement. I think we all feel.
I think the contempt proceeding would take quite a long time. It's going to be drawn out in court. By your insistence on this format, haven't you essentially blown the opportunity to question the Attorney General here in a public setting?
No, but I think Burrell's going to.
Well, at this point, I think there's also a question of what the Attorney General is going to continue to say and do. He did not show in the Senate hearings yesterday that he was going to answer some of the very difficult questions. In fact, he made it clear on several occasions that he thought that it was fine for the president to lie, for the president to say things to people and encourage them to not tell the truth. So at this point, another step that we will be taking and that the chairman has already put into place is we want Robert Mueller to come and testify before us. At this point, I think we need to hear directly from the special counsel about his report and about his findings. Clearly, he felt troubled enough by what Attorney General Barr did and said that he wrote not one but 2 letters to the Attorney General. He even prepared summaries of his 2 volumes that could be released immediately to the American people. And yet, we did not see that happen. It was almost 32 days, I think, from the time that he delivered his report to yesterday when we learned that he had these summaries prepared and ready to go to the public. So at this point, I think in addition to holding the Attorney General in contempt should these negotiations not work out, we need to have Robert Mueller. At this point, I don't feel that I can trust anything that the Attorney General is saying because I don't know who the Attorney General works for. He certainly is not working for the American people.
Well, there is, well, first of all, the one thing I'd like to say is Democrats are not rushing toward impeachment, but neither are we afraid of it. The format that we're using is a format to be able to educate the Congress and the American people about how much untruth has been said. These are dangerous times because if we set the precedent as General Barr has done, who is next not to respond to the Congress? What cabinet officer in the midst of a crisis? Is it the acting Department of Homeland Security Secretary in the midst of a crisis? Is it the Health and Human Services? So one of the things that we will continue to do is use possibly the contempt proceeding, as our chairman may decide to do. In addition, we will not take off an ultimate act that we are allowed to do under the Constitution. But let me show you the example. When the tapes were found with Richard Nixon, the American people said enough is enough. I can assure you, as we build the blocks of finding out the truth, there is still that proceeding, but we will not be baited into it as our friends in the committee choose to try and do. We will only do it as this Constitution gives us the power to do. So we're not intimidated by the fact that it may be a little longer. The idea of the attorneys, as many have seen, is the continuity of questioning. That means that you can cross-examine in the midst of your time frame. Collectively, the excellent members of Congress that are on this committee, I have been stunned and excited by their questioning and their thoughts. We will put all that together. But what happens when the lawyers, and I have been on impeachment proceedings in this committee, judges and others, is the line of reasoning that allows even the American people to see the building blocks and the story narrative of truth that is so very important. Well, I will just say this. Our committee chairman is very patient, but he's very knowledgeable, and he understands the time frame. Let me say this. Let's hope that there is something productive over the weekend. Let's hope that the General of the United States understands his duty and, as my colleagues have said, will pay and affirm allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and not a single man who is fleeting in that job. So we're hoping that General Barr's own credibility and love of his country over the weekend will generate a resolution of this.
Can I just add one specific thing? It's also important to recognize the House rules permit this kind of questioning. We approved it in a motion before the committee. It's done. It has been done many other times, most recently with Dr. Blasey Ford. So the real question is not why do we want to collect evidence in this way. The real question is to the Attorney General. What are you afraid of? Why don't you want to be questioned in a half-hour period by a staff attorney? That's the real question for the American people and for the media, frankly.
But to your previous point, are you concerned that this is now going to get bogged? To your previous point, are you concerned that this is now just going to get bogged down in court? And are you all okay with the fact that it may now take longer for you to get all of these answers that you're demanding?
Right. So let's just walk through the process of how contempt proceedings work. So Attorney General Bill Barr has violated a lawful subpoena to provide us the full Mueller report and its underlying evidence. If we go to contempt, the House Judiciary Committee will vote. If we vote it out, it goes to the House floor. Once the House floor votes it out, then it triggers a number of things. Our House counsel can go litigate in court, but we also have inherent contempt powers that courts have upheld for us to take immediate action irrespective of the courts. We can start imposing fines on that person. In the past, they had a House jail. I don't think we're going to go that far, but courts have upheld that as well. So Congress's power will not be abdicated. We will enforce it, and the delay will not affect us because we can start imposing fines on that person immediately upon contempt off the House floor, and we will go there if he does not cooperate.
But that's still a very long time before you get any of the answers that you were hoping to get here today.
That's just a matter of weeks to get something off the House floor.
Go ahead.
What would it take to move to impeach Bill Barr? Is that something that's on the table? And what would it take for you to take that drastic step, do you think?
Well, with respect to the Attorney General's behavior, nothing's on the table or off the table. We're evaluating things in a step-by-step basis. And the next step, as has been illustrated, will be to possibly pursue contempt. And Congress has control over that timeline. But understand the stakes. What we are witnessing is the slow loss of our democratic republic. And we can either allow it to happen or we can stand up against it. Some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, they're behaving like a cover-up caucus for this president, a wholly owned subsidiary of the Trump administration. That is not what the founding fathers envisioned. And so we are not going to allow the notion of a presidential dictatorship to take hold. This is a democracy. We're a separate and co-equal branch of government. And we are going to uphold that principle by any means necessary.
He volunteered to come in today. Is this jumping way too far ahead? And then second, Congresswoman, you had talked about how staff questioning goes during an impeachment hearing. So are you equating this to what you wanted to happen today to an impeachment hearing?
No, I think my colleague just indicated that this process was used during the Kavanaugh hearings. And what we're saying is that this is... That's the point. That's the point that we're making. That this is allowable under House rules. The Congress, as the Senate, the House and the Senate, can discern and decide their own rules and the best approach to draw evidence or information so that we can make the appropriate decision. Let me also say we're writing legislation regarding what happened in Volume 1 and Volume 2. How incredulous is it of all of the contacts with Russians that there was no legal basis other than collusion or conspiracy? Why wasn't there interacting with Russian operatives, enemies of the American people, and that would be a criminal act, which we're introducing legislation on that or have already done so. But what I would say to you is we're only following the rules, and the rules are that we're allowed to do this. And I guess I asked the question of the General of the United States, as has been said, very aptly. And my heart really breaks on this. If any of us who are lawyers or non-lawyers, it really breaks. I asked him, would he not, in his view of his own reputation and his view of being the chief legal officer, has been said, for the people of the United States, would he, should I say that, would he please adhere to the rule of law and appear before this committee? But I do want to conclude by saying we're moving on other witnesses because our task is to find out the truth.
Why didn't you take the Justice Department's the opportunity they provided to you to go and see a lesser redacted copy of the report? My understanding is only Republicans have done that. Democrats refused to do so.
We weren't.
We didn't have that
Well,
opportunity, actually.
that opportunity was not given to us. Well, let's refocus on what's at stake here, okay? 6 weeks after the special counsel submitted his report, the Congress of the United States still doesn't have it. This is completely unprecedented. In every other case of a special counsel or an independent counsel report, Congress got it within a couple of days, completely unredacted. The redactions are up to us. And special counsel Mueller gave the redactions directly to Attorney General Barr. That's what we've learned in the last couple of days from the correspondence which was leaked through the media. That was the only reason we found out about it. It was very clear that the report could have been released within a couple of days. But instead, Attorney General Barr wanted to pull a propaganda smokescreen over the entire country. And we are still laboring to unearth the real report, to get it unredacted so we can read it. That is our constitutional power. And my colleagues keep saying we are a co-equal branch of government. We are at least a co-equal branch of government. We are Article 1 before Article 2. We are the lawmaking power of the American people. We are the direct representatives of the American people, and the president's job is just to take care that the laws are faithfully executed, not to make sure that the laws are thwarted and frustrated and violated. And yet the entire administration is now in a full-blown cover-up mode to try to hide the contents of Special Counsel Mueller's report. And all that Attorney General Barr did was to try to tell a false story to the American people about what was in there, and they continue to scramble to throw out more and more propaganda to cover up what's really in there. We are going to get to the bottom of this. We are going to have the real facts come out to the American people. We are going to allow the American people to hear directly from the witnesses, including Special Counsel Mueller, including Don McGahn, the White House counsel, about what the president did to obstruct justice. Because if we allow a president to obstruct justice and to convert the government of the United States into a money-making vehicle for himself and his family and his business, then that will set a precedent that generations to come will regret and lament. We've got a constitutional responsibility here, and we're going to fulfill it.
I just want to say one thing about Director Mueller. I was here when he was director of the FBI, and I was offended by his character and integrity being sullied yesterday in the Senate Judiciary hearing. I want to thank Director Mueller for his work and his team's work. I don't know what he's going to say before our committee. I cannot give a prognosis on what he will say. But I do believe the American people owe him a debt of gratitude, and I also know that it has been reported by people who know him. They've said he has never sent a letter, maybe once, a letter of this kind in his career. He wants to be known as an ex-Marine who serves his nation. And so I would just suggest to all of us that if he wrote of the United States, the Attorney General, was not representing him, his team, or the people of the United States, that in fact he turned out to be the personal lawyer of a person who is fleeting in an office that belongs to the people of the United States, and that's the presidency. And I can only say that as he comes before our committee, none of us can dictate what he will say, but I do believe that he will tell the truth in the best way he possibly can. And I want to say to Director Mueller, thank you very much for your service.
Thank you all.